Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to create some bougie birthday cards using the new bougie birthday collection from Spellbinders. This die set here is called the Ganache Gateau die. And then we have the Treat Yourself gift card holder, perfect for creating little gift card holders. I'll create a couple in this video, one to go inside a card and one to just have on its own. Then we have the classy numbers with some nice large numbers as well as accessories. And then this one here is called the Birthday Cheer die set. And you can see how large these scripts are. The cardstock there I have is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So they're really quite large for an A2 card. Perfect for a 5 by 7 card. Most of the cards I'm creating today are A2 size, so you can see them on there. Then we have the fabulous birthday die set as well as the Bougie Birthday press plate and die set. And then the 3D embossing folder called Born to Sparkle, as well as a coordinating stencil to color in those gorgeous gems. So I'm going to start off by creating some sentiments for my cards so that I have them ready to go. I have my BetterPress system here and I'm using some BetterPress cardstock, taping it to the clear plate, putting my press plate on the base. I'm using some worn lipstick distressing to ink up my press plate. And I'll typically kind of rub it on my press plate first and then I'll tap it on my press plate, trying to make sure to get it all over the place. Then I'm running it through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine for the pressure and to press that sentiment image in there. So once I take it off here, it's a little bit blotchy, so I'm going to do it again. Now I have yellow tape all around the gray mat on my BetterPress base, and that's to keep that gray mat secure. It's not fixed in there, it's in there loosely. And if I didn't have that in there, there's a chance it might shift on me and I wouldn't get a perfect press. By having it taped in place, I know it's not shifting at all. And as long as I haven't moved that press plate while inking it, I know that I'm going to get it pressed in the same place. So that's why I have that yellow tape on there. I've had the odd question in the past about that, and that's why it's there, to make sure that if I need to press something a second time, that I know that that base part, that gray mat, hasn't shifted in any way. So I'm going to use the coordinating die set to cut out my sentiments. I use some Best Ever craft tape on there just to make sure that it keeps that die in place and it's not going to shift on me. Run it through my machine and I have a whole bunch of sentiments ready to go for all the cards that I'm creating there. So I have a bunch of pre-die cutting done. I have them set or organized in my craft stacks. I'm using the same color combination for all of my cards today. So I have pink sand cardstock. This is Dahlia cardstock that I am gluing down right now. And the teal color is Lagoon. On my very last card, I also bring in some teal topaz, which is just a lighter shade than that Lagoon. For this card, I'm using an A2 card base. I have some Dahlia cardstock that is trimmed down to 4 1/8 inches by 5 3/8 inches. And then my white piece there is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And you can see when I put that cake die cut on there, it's really quite big. It fills in that whole card. If you wanted more space around that cake, you could easily create a 5 by 7 card and have that. This die being so big, it would also be fun to create a shaped card with, because it's nearly the size of an A2 card base. I think it would be fun to play with it like that. So with this die set, the drips for the ganache are separate. So you can choose to have them on there or not. And when you do want to have them on there, you can place them exactly where you want them to be. So I put some glue on there and I'm using some Barely Art glue in a nice fine tip bottle. Works perfectly for really fine, narrow pieces like this. And I can put it under some of the lower drips of that ganache and tuck it underneath there. Now I wanted this ganache to be glossy, so I'm adding a layer of Glossy Accents on it. Now this area is really quite big. I should have used my larger bottle for this. I like the smaller bottle when I use, or when I'm working with smaller areas. But to be honest, by the time I got to the end of this area here, my hand was pretty sore from squeezing that bottle. So a larger area here would be better for, or it would be better to use a larger bottle. You really don't need the really fine tip for that large area on the top. The fine tip is definitely helpful for the little drips going down. When I'm doing Glossy Accents, I kind of like to do it like I'm icing a cookie. I will do a line around it and then flood coat it in. For this particular one, I didn't do that because I was worried about putting my hands accidentally in the drips that are going down. So I just did my outer layer or my outline or an area of my outline about an inch or two, and then it did my flood in there, and then just kind of worked from top to bottom, left to right, so that I wouldn't accidentally drag my hands in some wet stuff while I was doing it. And then because of this larger area, it did take quite a while for it to dry. Typically, when I'm doing a smaller area, I will wait about an hour just to make sure it's thoroughly dry. This time, after an hour, there was still an area towards the right-hand side that was milky colored. So you want to make sure to wait until it's completely clear. And then I tend to wait just a little bit longer because sometimes it'll be dry on the surface, but underneath it's not quite set. So I would like to make sure that it is good and dry before I continue on or before I do something else with the card. So now that that Glossy Accents has completely dried, I'm adding my sentiment to it. I used the Happy die for this, and then I used the Birthday Gorgeous from one of the press plate sentiments. I didn't want to use the birthday die set because it's so large. It doesn't fit on the width of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. I didn't want to make this a vertical or a horizontal card, and I also didn't want to make this particular one a 5 by 7 card. I also like the combination of a scripty die with a press plate sentiment or a sub sentiment or something like that, just to give it a bit of a unique and different look. Once I have put my sentiment on there, I'm going to add some of the confetti or some of the sprinkles. Now this is just die cut out of scraps of cardstock, and I really love the look of those confetti or those sprinkles on top of the gloss from that ganache. The different textures to it is really nice. As I'm gluing the confetti sprinkles down, I'm trying to make it look as random as possible. Some overlapping each other, some not. Trying to make sure I don't have a bunch of the same color right beside each other. I'm going to put some on the top of the cake and then some on the icing along the bottom. Now I kept my icing just one solid color on the bottom there. There's also an additional die that you can use and layer every second layer to give it 2 colors to it, just for a little bit of a different look. I wanted to keep it somewhat simple because this is such a large die set. I didn't want to add too much to it. So once I'm done with the top, I will go in with the bottom, or adding those sprinkles to the bottom. And you can see that I'm just putting a dot of the glue on there and then putting the sprinkle on top of it. And what I'm trying to do, unsuccessfully for the most part, especially for the top, is trying to put a dot of glue and then kind of drop that confetti on there just so that it looks a little bit more random, and sometimes it'll be tilted in a different way than others. I did find, like I said, for the most part, I was failing at that and missing the drop of glue because that's the way my coordination works. But I thought it might look a little bit more natural, a little bit more random if I did it that way. And by having a few sprinkles overlapping each other and some not, it gives it a little bit different look as well. So there is the first card. And again, I love the different texture with that Glossy Accents on the top of the cake. It looks fantastic. For my second card, I'm going to use that gift card holder. I'm using several of the different sentiments, and I also am using the macarons that are in the Gateau Ganache die set. I have them already assembled for the most part in a bunch of different stacking and different shading, just to look a little bit different from each other. I didn't want to have a bunch that were all exactly the same. For my mats, I have a piece of that Lagoon Cardstock trimmed to 4 1/8 inches by 5 3/8 inches. And then my white piece, just like the last card, is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. So the pieces for the macarons are really easy to put together. Again, I have them die cut out of a bunch of different pieces, most of them assembled. I'm just assembling one on screen so you see how easy it is to put together. Now, I didn't do anything like this for this video, but I think these could make good burgers as well because of the different layering on them. I think you could have fun and create a burger with them. Obviously, it would be fairly tiny, but it might be fun to play with and add that as an accent on a card. So with the macaron, the one that I assembled, drying, I'm just going to put the gift card holder together. I'm folding along the score lines that are created when you do the die cutting. There is a scallop piece that gets put over top. There's also another piece in the die set that doesn't have the scallops around it if you wanted something a little bit more plain. It's a rectangle that has some curved corners to it, or rounded corners to it. I'm also adding the 2U die cuts to the front of this. So what I'm going to do for this card is I'm going to do Bougie 40th Birthday on the front with the macarons, and then put 2U with the gift card holder on the inside of the card. You could give this on its own if you wanted to, but I thought it'd be fun to have a gift card holder right on the inside of the card, just as something a little bit different. It's really easy to assemble. I'm just using some strong double-sided tape on the little bottom flap there and closing that, putting the little gift card in there, and then I will glue that onto the inside of the card once my front of my card is done. So I have the Bougie Birthday here die cut, and obviously this is a horizontal card, so you can see how much space that birthday die cut takes up, but there is still some space at the bottom. So I'm just going to put those macarons kind of piled along the bottom. I'm trying to make sure that I don't have ones that have the outside the same color right next to each other as much as possible. Trying to make it look a little bit random, make it look like they're just kind of piled up on top of each other at the bottom of the card there. So I'm once again using that liquid glue. I use it for pretty much everything in this video, and you can see as I'm working that I'm not waiting for the glue to dry. What I'm trying to do is put all of these on top of each other there. Then I will put the sentiments on, and then I'll give it a few moments to dry before opening it up and adding that gift card holder to the inside of the card. I have a large acrylic block here that I like to put on things while they're drying, just to hold everything nice and flat. Make sure that that glue has contact with each other, and it just frees up my hands to be working on other things while that glue is drying. And you can see how having a nice fine tip on a glue bottle makes it really easy for gluing down sentiments like this. Now I chose 40 for this particular card. You can create it whatever number you want. And I love the fact that that number die set has the additions on there to make 40th or first or whatever it is. I chose to do mine in an opposite color just to make it stand out a little bit more. You could easily do it in the same color. You can see though that with that Bougie, the birthday, and the macarons, I don't have a whole lot of space left on the card. I'm overlapping them a little, which I can get away with because I have those different colors there. I also think it just looks a little bit more interesting by having that 40 in a different color. It makes it pop off the card a little bit more. And because I have some of that Lagoon color cardstock in some of the macarons, it does tie into that as well as the matte. So with my card front done and ready to go and just drying, I'm ready to put my gift card holder on the inside of the card. I could use that liquid glue to glue it in place, but I chose to use my double-sided tape simply because I had it there, and that way I don't have to wait for that to dry on the inside. Now, obviously, because I have that gift card holder in there with the gift card in there, it adds a tiny little bit of bulk to the inside of the card, but not so much that I think it would cost more in postage if you wanted to send this. Now, I've already done that gift card holder for the inside of the card, but I wanted to create just a gift card holder on its own. This isn't really very much different than the one on the inside of the card. The only difference is I added the little streamers or whatever you want to call here. I have them die cut out of some Dahlia cardstock, and I have the upper layers to it die cut out of that pink sand cardstock. Now in my little craft stacks there in the tray, you can see that one looks a little different from the other. One of them I die cut the base out of the pink sand and then did the layers on top with the Dahlia cardstock. It looked a little off because the back layers visually in my head should be the darker color. So the other two I did with Dahlia cardstock in the back and then pink sand on the front. And to me, that looked a little bit more natural. It's really personal preference. And I think anyone that would get this isn't really going to criticize it. It's just my personal thought on that. But that's why they look a little bit different from each other. And really, I think once they're on the front of the card or on the inside of the gift card or whatever, no one's really going to notice the difference. Or really, they'll likely think it was done on purpose. Now, if you're doing a gift card holder like this is the type of thing that I think would be fun to, say have a gift or bouquet of flowers that you're giving someone and then put like a little gift card holder in there, and you can put a message on the inside as well if you'd like. I probably wouldn't be handing this just on its own as is. You could, but for me, I probably wouldn't. It would probably be in addition to something else or tucked into something else. So for this particular one, I did For You on the outside of the gift card holder. I'm going to put one streamer on the outside here, and then I will put the other ones on the inside. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the leftover confetti from my first card, and I'm just going to add that to it and fill in some of the area. I chose one of the sentiments that were created from the Bougie Birthday Sentiment Press Plate set. It fit perfectly on the bottom flap of that gift card holder, and I love the fact that there is that bottom flap so you can easily add that sentiment there. That first one, or the second card where I have that gift card holder in there, I have one that just said treat yourself, and I thought that was perfect for a little gift card holder there. So I don't have a ton of these confetti created, so I'm just sprinkling them on this card. I didn't really want to be die cutting some more, and I am putting some Lagoon ones on top of Lagoon Cardstock. In person, you can see it a lot better than you can see it on screen. On screen, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. In person, it just adds a little bit of texture to the inside of that gift card holder. And once again, I just didn't want to stop and die cut some more, and I just wanted to use those pieces up. And it just fills in that area. It makes those streamers look a little bit less kind of out of place or boring or whatever. The other option here would be to do a bunch of different streamers and have more than what I had done on there. I just didn't want to fill up the area. I just wanted to give an idea, but I didn't want to do too many streamers in there or have too much stuff on the inside of that, because I also want to make sure that there's space for a message. For my next card here, I thought this cake would make a really cool wedding cake. So it would be perfect for a wedding card. So what I'm doing here is I have my glimmer machine out and heating up. I have the 4 and the U from the Vivid Sweeping Script Sentiments press plate set, and I'm foiling it with some Aura foil onto some Alabaster cardstock. So the Sweeping Script Sentiments press plate set is part of the Vivid Expressions collection that was released this month as well. And I just thought it would be great for this particular card, but you could also create that cake using one of the background press plates to create that foiled look to it. And you can see that I got my sentiment wrong. I have the 4 upside down. So it just gave me an opportunity to reposition these plates. I'm going to foil it again. I'm just going to foil it right on the back of that piece of cardstock. There's no reason why I can't still use this piece of cardstock. You're never going to know that it was foiled on the back, but I did want to leave that in there and mention it because you're going to be able to see that on the back of this cardstock anyways as I refoil it. So it is harder to place this to know exactly where it's going to go, and obviously to make sure that it's all right side up. I got my words a little backwards there, but I did want to create this on a piece of 4 1/4 and by 5.5 inch cardstock before die cutting it, because this way I can position it where I want those words to be when I have it on my finished card. And I wanted to make sure that I had that full piece there, so I had a little bit of wiggle room when it came to die cutting. Obviously there's not a ton of wiggle room there, so I had kind of an idea where I wanted those words to be before doing my die cutting. If you want a little bit more wiggle room, you could always use a larger piece of cardstock. So for the florals for this, I thought wedding cakes typically have florals on them. I'm using some Vivid Blooms. This is also part of the Vivid Expressions collection from this month, and I have them die cut in the colors that I'm using for the rest of the cards for this particular video. The assembly for these die cut cards are very, very easy. When I've done a previous video, I've done some solid hot foiling with that Aura foil. So I chose some of that foiled cardstock to die cut some of my flower centers, just to add that Aura foil to different elements of this particular card. Now, because that cake is bigger, you already know how big it is compared to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card. And I'm adding these florals. This particular card is going to be 5 by 7, just to give a little bit more room for these floral die cuts as well as for the cake. And I thought it would be too squishy and too cluttered to have it in a smaller card. So when I'm creating cards like this, I like to assemble all my florals ahead of time so that when it comes time to putting my card together, they are ready to go. So for my mat around this card, I'm using some Inca Gold cardstock. It's from Tonic. It's very similar to that Aura Glimmer Foil. It is a gold mirror cardstock that has an iridescent shine to it. I have that trimmed down to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and then I have a white mat here that is trimmed to 4.5 by 6.5. So I'm going to see just a little bit of that Inca Gold foil around the edges. Now I used some Aura solid hot foiled pieces for some of the pieces in my florals. You could easily die cut that out of the Inca Gold cardstock as well. I just like to use up as much of that solid hot foiled cardstock as possible. And sometimes it doesn't work for some of the things that are for card elements or whatnot. So I like to use that to do some die cutting and get use out of it that way. So as I'm assembling here, I'm starting with the cake base layer. And then I will go in and add some of the florals once I have the base of my cake already ready to go. And even though I'm using the same color scheme as the first card, I'm using them, have different pieces die cut with different things just to give it a little bit of a different look from that first card. This one I wanted to look a little bit more wedding-like, so I did that alabaster as the card base, and then I used some of the Dahlia cardstock for the ganache at the top as well as the trim on the bottom. Now I'm putting some of the drips there. I'm trying to keep in mind where I want my florals to go, so I don't have those drips behind where I want my florals to go. I did these little icing things in the pink sand cardstock. In hindsight, I think I would have preferred if I left them off, but again, it's entirely up to you when you're creating with it, but I just wanted you to see what they would look like. I also was trying to create something that, again, looked different from the cake base from my first one. So I decided to add these to this. I think this would be probably more suitable for that first card, being a birthday card. I'm not sure they work well for a wedding cake. So when I'm putting my cards together with florals, I like to use an acrylic block not only to hold pieces down while they're drying, but I also like to put that on top of my card, put a few of the florals on there so I can see exactly how they're going to look on my card, see it right on top of that card base, and then I can lift that acrylic block to the side and know exactly where I wanted each one of those pieces to be. For this particular card, I did that really, really loosely. I only put a few pieces there just to make sure that the design that I had in my head was going to work for what I wanted. And I could tell after just the first flowers that it was going to work for the look that I was going for. So when I'm gluing these pieces down, I start on the outer edges, the behind pieces. So I'll typically start with some foliage, some floral sprays, kind of doing the top and the bottom of the outer edges of where I want my florals to go. Then I will put a few on the inside, and then I will put my center flower, but I will also have some smaller flowers to tuck in around my center flower. For some of the flowers where it works for them, I will use my fingers to curve the petals just to give them some natural dimension to it. I don't put foam pop dots or anything behind these. You could always squirt a little glob of glue just to support that if you wanted. I typically don't worry about things like that. If it gets flattened in the mail, it might. You can easily do either pop dots behind there or, like I said before, a squirt of glue to help support that to prevent it from flattening. These are typically the type of cards that I would hand deliver to someone because they are ones that take a little bit of extra time. There's a little bit of extra love put in them. So I typically wouldn't mail something like this. After doing the extra little florals tucked behind my center floral, I will also tuck in some leaves and just some of the areas that have a little bit sparse that just need a little bit of filling out. And as well as those leaves, I'll put in some of those other florals towards the outer areas of my arrangement. Now I'll let that dry, but while it's drying, I'm going to put some gold Nouveau drops on the centers of sunflowers. I'm also going to put a little bit of stickles on the centers of sunflowers just to give them a little bit of extra sparkle. There's sparkle on there already with that glimmer foil, the Oral Glimmer Foil on there, but some of the pieces I find that just a tiny little bit of extra sparkle, it also gives it some extra texture. I typically will use Stardust Stickles because it's transparent. You still see the cardstock color underneath there. It doesn't cover any color. It just adds that bit of texture as well as that bit of sparkle. So I set that aside to dry completely while I was working on my last card. So for the last card, I'm going to use that Born to Sparkle 3D embossing folder. It just has gems all over the place. And I think this is just a fun one to create a background for a card. And I love the fact that there's a stencil making it super easy to color it. Now, because gems typically have some shimmer and sparkle to them, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to bring out my favorite interference ink pads to color in those gems. Before I use that pad to color in the gems, I'm taking some Hickory Smoke Distress ink and a detailed ink blending brush, and I'm just doing some shading at the bottom of each one of those gems. The interference pad that I'm using for this one is called Teal Twist. So on the areas of light or white cardstock that I'm going to be adding this color to, you're going to see that teal color, but on these pieces that I'm adding that Hickory Smoke Distress ink on, you're going to see the interference color. And for this particular pad, it's a pink color, so it works well with the color scheme that I'm using for the rest of these cards. I also do this same technique with some Black Soot Distress ink. It's a little bit more dramatic. For this particular card, I wanted it to be just slightly more subtle. It's not too much more subtle, but I wanted to have that gray on there instead of the black. I wanted that teal to really be that focus. So when you tilt this into the light, not only do you have that texture from that embossed background, but you have that shimmer from the interference. So even on the teal parts where you can see the teal ink, when you tilt it into the light, you'll get a little bit of that pinky color with that interference. And then when it comes to the areas that are on top of that Hickory Smoke Distress ink, you're going to see more of that pinky color. Now, when I am doing this ink blending, I'm trying to make sure that I don't have too much ink on top of or on my ink blending brush, because if it's too juicy, you can squish ink or squeeze ink underneath that stencil. I'm also trying to start on a solid part of that stencil just to get any excess ink off of there. As I'm doing my ink blending, I can always blend that color back into the embossed background, but it's always easier to add more layers of ink. If you get too much on there and it seeps underneath there, there's no way to fix that. So once I have my background done, I trimmed a mat to be 4 1/8 inches by 5 3/8 inches, and my gem piece is 4 inches by 5 1/4. I wanted to see as much of those gems as possible, so I kept it as big as possible. For my mat, I'm using the Worn Lipstick Distress ink that I used for my sentiments, and I'm just creating that mat with it. You could use solid colored cardstock as well. I had the ink pad out. I knew it was going to be an exact match, so I decided to use that. The Dahlia cardstock would likely work as well. It's just a slightly different tone than that Worn Lipstick Distress ink, but it would have worked because I had the pad out. I had the cardstock. I just figured it's easy to do that. I often do that technique for inking around the outside of an edge with that interference pad to make sure that those my mats match any images that I do with those interference, but I didn't want this particular one to have a teal mat around it because my sentiments were done with that worn lipstick. This was an easy way to make sure that that mat, the interference as well as my sentiments kind of all blended together, and it just kind of frames it really nicely as well. So here is that finished card, Born to Sparkle. So the sentiment there I have says, "You're a gem, you were born to sparkle." I put 2 sentiments on there. They worked really, really well together. Then we have our wedding card with that aura foiled for you, as well as those aura foiled sentiments for parts of the floral die cuts. Then we have our just cute little gift card holder, perfect for tucking in anything or adding to the middle or the center inside a part of a card. Then our Bougie 40th birthday with those macarons on the outside, that gift card holder on the inside. Again, perfect way just to add a little extra something to someone's card. This way it's not going to fall out when they take the card out of the envelope. It's nice and secure in there, and it's just a different way to give someone a gift card. And last but not least, our first card with the Happy Birthday Gorgeous, the Ganache with that Glossy Accents on there, creating a really nice glossy top to the cake. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really had fun creating with this collection. I hope you have a wonderful day.